I think now perhaps, ah, you have our first question. Lisa Alexander asks, where are you located, Tim? So
I
you can
am
answer that.
located. I am located in Wasanich territory. This is the local indigenous people, and I am at the base of a mountain. That's not a really tall mountain, but a mountain called Snaka in Senchothan, which means snow mountain. So to take that out of a Wasanich context, I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, on the southern tip of Vancouver Island, in unceded territory.
All right, I think we can now begin. We have given, I think, sufficient time for people to arrive. So let me begin. Welcome, dear friends, to tonight's Insight Project conversation with the distinguished Canadian poet and essayist Tim Lilburn, whom I will introduce momentarily. Just a word now about the Insight Project. The Insight Project is a multi-year program series that seeks to put theology in conversation with a wide range of partners in the humanities, social sciences, and the natural sciences. At its core, Insight seeks to redefine our understanding of theology, not simply through the reformulation of doctrine, but through a reframing of the imagination. The project and all that is possible through it is made possible by a generous alumnus of Union Theological Seminary, Mary Coelho, who is here with us this evening. So we extend our thanks to Mary. Before I turn to introducing Tim, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement, a practice far more common in Canada than here in the US. Union Theological Seminary acknowledges and honors the land on which this building stands as the homeland and territory of the Lenape people, as well as the habitat and dwelling place of the many beings they have been in relationship with. We give thanks to all of the spirits of nature. We pay respect to Lenape peoples, past, present, and future, and express support for the flourishing of Indigenous peoples and lifeways within this place and everywhere. Now, tonight, we'll hear from Tim Lilburn, and then I'll inaugurate a conversation with him before we field your questions that you can type even now into the Q&A box at any time. Now, a brief introduction of Tim. You already heard where Tim lives, in the Bowker Creek watershed on Vancouver Island. He is the author of 12 books of poetry, including Harmonia Mundi, The House of Charlemagne, Asinia Boya, Orphic Politics, Killsite, and To the River. His work has received the Governor General's Award, the Canadian Authors Association Award, the European Medal of Poetry and Art, which is the Homer Prize, and the Saskatchewan Book of the Year Award, among other prizes. His poetry has been translated widely. Lilburn is also the author of 3 essay collections, Living in the World as If It Were Home, Going Home, and The Larger Conversation, Contemplation and Place. Students in my class have read that book, and so some of the questions that you will hear come from our engagement with that book in particular. A new essay collection, Numinous Seditions, Interiority and Climate Change, will appear from University of Alberta Press in September of this year. There's much more I could say, and I'm skipping a bit of that to say just a personal word. These things that I just read to you are good to know about him, particularly among those of us here in the US. Tim is far better known naturally in Canada. But I'm also privileged to know Tim as a friend. In that kind of encounter, what you come to know about Tim is that he possesses the capacity for a kind of searching, intuitive listening of the sort possessed by the best spiritual directors. In his presence, you feel seen and heard at such a depth that you're brought home to yourself and learn to see yourself afresh. Of course, it is just this kind of listening and receptivity that Tim commends to us in his writing. Capacities we must acquire, he argues, in order to be at home where we are, rather than floating in alienated disconnection from the land. I trust after you hear him today that you will be convinced that Tim is one of the indispensable voices of our time, someone we must hear if we are to save ourselves from the worst of the climate crisis. What that crisis will bring to us if we do not learn how to come home into our belonging to the particular corner of the natural world in which we live. Tim, we are so grateful that you are here with us.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for that introduction, and good evening to everyone. I am going to talk about contemplation and land, contemplation and place. There's also the word faith in the title of my presentation, and I would like to get to that, but it may not be. I may not be getting to it until the question period. Yeah, I want to talk to you about how I came to this linking of contemplation and place. I hadn't put the two of these things together up until my early 40s. Theology and land just didn't, as a pair, didn't appear in imagination at all. I was caught by the scent of transcendence, and kind of in a transfixed state around ascent. I around this time completed a graduate degree in philosophy at Gonzaga University. I was a Jesuit scholastic, so if I was anything really, I was a Lonerganian, a follower of the Neo-Thomist, Jesuit Neo-Thomist Bernard Lonergan. And I was preoccupied as he was preoccupied by cognitional structure and the pure desire to know, and place was completely irrelevant in this particular project. In the summer of 1990, I had an eruptive moment that came out of the blue. This insight, and I'm going to call it a catanyxic blow, a transformative blow, was that I didn't know how to be where I was. I didn't know how to be where I was. I have to give you a little bit of context here. I just returned to the Great Plains, to the capital city of the province of Saskatchewan after years of living in Eastern Canada and in Spokane. And I was there to essentially take up a job teaching philosophy, teaching creative writing, English literature at a small, tiny Benedictine college in the north central part of the province. I was just leaving the Regina Public Library one August afternoon before I went up to St. Peter's to teach. A big storm was coming in from the south. People in this downtown park were kind of milling around in the park. Outside of the park, other folks were leaving buildings and shops and whatnot to go home from work. And I took all of this in, standing at the top of the steps of the Regina Public Library. I hadn't lived in Saskatchewan in, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. Now for the moment of turning. It became clear to me that the Cree men who were in the park without a doubt, came from the ground. They seem to be rooted in this place. But everything else in this moment of transformation was floating. Floating maybe a couple of feet off the ground. But all of the buildings around the park, a beautiful First Baptist place, the Venerable Hotel Saskatchewan, floating and hovering, and it seemed that these places, especially the buildings, were kind of caught in a lightning nostalgia for metropolitan centers of power like Winnipeg, Toronto, the East, Europe itself, and mostly what what the culture wanted, the buildings and the people in the buildings, was to be acknowledged by these places that they leaned towards, that they were nostalgic for. The Cree men obviously had no need for this approval. My sense of unattachment at that moment, my floating where I was extremely disconcerting. And this sense lasted for quite some time. In fact, I would say it pretty well comes up to the present day. I had had a vision of autochthonicity, of coming from the land. And I knew in a flash that this state was not mine and possibly could never be mine. I felt an urgency around correcting this situation. I'd had a late realization of a lack in my life, an absence that I had built my life around. And that absence was connection to place. And it wasn't just me that was unconnected, but it was the culture that had shaped me, and the culture that I was having a vision of standing on the top of the steps of the Regina Public Library. Most of the books in that library, all of the religious, or most of the religious practices, the political ambitions, etc., within the culture that had shaped me, was not rooted where it was. It was dreaming of this other place, and affirmation, hoping for affirmation from this other place. So but nevertheless, I felt, I mean, much of my work comes out of a state of panic, really. And I thought, I can't live like this. I can't live in an unconnected way. I can't live with this lightness, this sort of essential lightness in me. So I had to find a way to be there. But how to establish connection with place? I could find no how-to books on the subject. No one advertised the capacity to teach me how to be autochthonous. But I knew that I had to do something, because I had a sense of drifting in a loneliness for where I was. I didn't know the names of hardly any of the native plants. I had no knowledge of what they were used for. My ignorance when I saw it shocked me and shamed me. But if I could join myself somehow with place, and Eros seemed to suggest that there was a how. There was a way that I could join myself with place. I was curious to see what this connection would have on my sense of self, my mental state, my political engagement, my theological and philosophical orientation. My question became how to be here, and it appeared in poems, it appeared in essays. I soon discovered that this was by no means a simple question. It occurred to me as I thought about this, and this is unfolding over weeks, months, years, decades. As I thought about this, that my lack of connection or my connection with place was based on how I looked at where I stood. My connection with place was based on how I looked at where I stood. But the look that I needed to achieve was a particular one. It was not a glance. It was not taking in scenery. It was not looking at the land, mining it for data. It was not a disciplined objectivity. Rather, it was an absorption in objects and parts of a locale, a taking in of a thing's thisness, as a Gerard Manley Hopkins or John Duns Scotus would say. A cliff's achaity. This is right out of Scotus. Achaity means thisness. He believed that the completing form of everything, individuals, but everything really, was an individuated form. So it was something that only this being or person or Khachali, hummingbird, had a cliff satiety, a hummingbird's there-ness. So somehow I had to achieve this. I had to achieve this look. And it further occurred to me that where this look could be most readily found was in contemplative practice. That there would be this is where that look would be shaped, nourished, fed, honed. I'm talking about certain traditional disciplines and state like statio, standing still, being physically still, but being still at your core, still but intent, and alacritas, and erotic, propelled by desire, a kind of elemental desire. So statio. Another contemplative exercise, the exercise of quies, delectable rest in a being or object, delectable rest in a being or object. And another contemplative state, contemplative exercise that would hone the look that I pursued, the apperception of achaity, otium sanctum, holy leisure, holy leisure. Augustine insists that this is busy leisure, that this is active leisure, but it is, yeah, it's holy leisure. John Cashin says, be like a bit of down in a light breeze, otium sanctum. So that look, the look that I was wanting to achieve or felt I needed to achieve in order to just basically see where I was, take that in, would be shaped in these and other places, coming from the sort of sapiential tradition of the West, and specifically the contemplative life. And perhaps you can see what I was doing at this time. I was dreaming a mystical theology laid on its side, kind of lateral, parallel on the earth. The sort of mystical theology that you would find in Evagrius or Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, Maximus the Confessor, folks like that, John Scotus Eriugena, etc. But my problem was at this time, where I was searching in the early days for some kind of solution and resolution around, wanting to be connected with place, was that the contemplative tradition had pretty well vanished, really from religion. It was unfindable in mainstream Catholicism, and certainly unfindable in the United Church of Canada. So I felt I was lost. I was bereft. I had a sense of what I was looking for, but I didn't know where to find it. As I thought further on this problem, I realized that in fact I was doubly lost, because it struck me that my distance from the world had also arisen from the fact that I occupied a colonial position in my culture. And as George Grant and Val Plumwood and others, but chiefly Grant and Plumwood point out, you cannot have a healthy relationship with something that you are committed to master. And I had grown up in this. I mean, I came from a working class Protestant background, but I had grown up in this aura of mastery, and so how could I see the world from this perspective? So how to decolonize my seeing and how to develop a contemplative life that vivified my relations with nature struck me as absolutely mammoth problems. Besides all that, my conundrum, how to be here, looked at from the perspective of my culture, mainstream culture, seemed to be raging hypochondria. Like, what is this? Why the upset? I speculate early in the larger conversation that because of this pan-cultural poverty that Europe brought to the New World, and that shaped me, that I grew up in, that people like me were at best in a state of pre-conversation with Indigenous people. Because we had not retrieved the contemplative capacity to see where we were, we had little to contribute to any possible conversation. Are we further along after UNDRIP? You know what UNDRIP is, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and Idle No More. Do you have Idle No More in the US?
I don't know it, but
it's this fabulous movement, informal movement that erupts in line dance or not line dancing, round dancing in malls, and it takes over malls, and the drummers are there drumming. So are we further along in these possible conversations after UNDRIP and Idle No More? Are we more contemplative? now? Are we more likely in the academy and elsewhere to prize primary process as a form of knowing? For instance, are we more likely to waste time in pingua otium, beautiful leisure, luxuriating in it? Take that up as an intimate discipline. Are we more likely to efface ourselves before things, see ourselves as below all rational beings, and know that they are without blame, as one of the 4th century Egyptian monks, Holman, in the Egyptian desert advised? I don't think we are. I don't think we are in that place. Such occupations, pingua otium, effacing ourselves before things, these are numinous seditions and unlikely to appeal to most people. Could these conversations ever occur? I was asked recently in an interview, could a link with land ever be possible? Yes, if we're struck deeply enough by beauty or by dread. But beauty is the greater draw, and we've known this since Plato. So I think that it is important to note and praise the earth. There's another undertaking that I found invaluable in the exercise, the spiritual political exercise of returning to one's place. And this is learning the language of the first language of the land where one lives. The land or the language of the Wasanish people is Sanchothan, and I have been learning Sanchothan over the last several years, working with a language keeper, knowledge keeper, amazing poet, Kevin Paul. When I first started learning Sanchothan, there were, Kevin told me that there were 25 speakers left. By the time I was to the stage where I could name the trees, say, which was quite an achievement for me. They were down to 8, but a miracle has happened, and kids in preschool have been learning Sanchothan, and now there are like dozens of people who are fluent. Kevin tells me that Sanchothan is a chthonic artifact, that it comes out of the earth. It is not confected by human beings, and the language, the little that I speak of it, the names of places, the names of trees, the names of winds, the names of interstates, has always struck me as quite beautiful, and including, like, it draws you in. And I find that speaking Sanchothan on the land and speaking Sanchothan to the land is a showing, is an act of showing courtesy toward the land. And it has been my experience that in treating the land this way, and here's where the subject of faith could come in, but I'm not ready to jump there just right away. In speaking Sanchothan on the land, yeah, exercising this courtesy or yeah, respect, attending to it. There is this sense of being included. There is this sense of the land opening its eyes, somewhat. I'm still an absolute novice in this, but I've taken the plunge. I've taken the plunge. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a good learner. My vowel pronunciation is still terrible. Kevin tells me, but I found that these words, the little that I know, they help and they protect. And I'm still learning. I'm not taking formal lessons, but Kevin and I talk a couple of times a week, and we always speak Senchothan, at least for part of that time. So yeah, this would be another matter. I think too that a closer relationship with land and taking up a friendship with the land could be an important climate change exercise, a politics and an activism. And I think maybe once we get to the colloquy that John and I are going to have in a minute or so, we can maybe get more into this. I just wanted to say that we have a long tradition of a kind of delightful dilemma, and that is the dilemma of the severed self. We see this severed self in Aristophanes' beautiful human sphere in Plato's Symposium that is lost because of hubris. We see the divided self also in Plato's troubled return of the cave captive to the real world in Republic Book 7. And we see it in the life of Saint Teresa of Avila, in her locutions, this voice from without, this autonomous, ingenious voice that she seeks union with. I would like to propose for people like me who have been shaped by a colonial culture and a capitalist culture, that the lost shard that Eros helps us retrieve and link to is the actual land where we are, and our way to this knitting together of this separated self, bifurcated self. Yeah, so the spherical human is lost because of hubris, and I think the actual land is lost to us because of hubris. And the path to connection, it has to go through reconciliation with Indigenous people. So I would like to finish with a couple of poems, if that's all right. Have I gone over?
You have been on point with time, so we definitely would love to hear a few poems.
Okay, so what I want to say before I read this work is that there are many kinds of poems, but let me just say there are two kinds of poems. There is a poem that is like a beautiful vase, or a neat piece of clothing, and it fits easily into understanding. And then there is a poem that sort of poem that is more like a spell. And this type of poem you undergo rather than read and find meaning. So there's going to be both types of poems operative in what I'm going to read to you, but it's mostly a spell. This is a poem in a few parts called Controlled Burn Theurgy. I think you might know what controlled burn is. It's when you light a fire to move against another fire. Controlled burn theurgy. Scene 1, beginning of the pandemic. Oh, sorry. I should say one more. I've already told you that. This is about Snakka, and I live at the base of Snakka. Scene 1, beginning of the pandemic. A stream flows out of the head of the mountain. The stream whitewaters hummingbirds. A stream out of oaks, mouth-banked below the tongue slither. Inaugural river saying. Worded, a stream comes out of the head of stone cliffs. And from the red moon bulbing from earth near the volcano, and the volcano's held high snow node. Language of stream, red moonlight gash on Harrow Strait, stream of flower, camas, stream of fawn lily, fish flower, stream of robin, stream of deer, color of waterlogged wood. Language here plucked, stream of whales, drift logs. Pray for my Aunt Edna, Uncle Jack, and Ronald, the soul's wave. For Louise, Martin, Louise's cousin, and Louise's other cousin, and her mother. For Peter Butala, brother Randy, their blowing souls wave rivers. Hummingbirds hammering stream and mountains thought, hummingbird and armament and language. The breasts of apple trees send light paths, the streams in night, the star flows, and languages stalking shimmer, and trees coursing to apple tree breasts. Scene 2. I worry about hummingbirds in this cold, ice spears rattling in the feeder I bring out on the hour, one male, locked, staring out of creeping torpor, 4:30 p.m. and gravid darkening, perched on a stick in a grow box mounted on the deck railing before the fluorescent explosion window. A February dream. A doe noses out a root behind the kitchen cupboards and forces her neck and head through a gouged hole in one of the doors. I stroke her throat. The new country stands quivering. Its black eye is thrown over me, a tarp. The breasts of apple trees send light paths, charcoal stream in night, cinder drift. The star flows send language as bees make an attempt at apple tree breasts. Scene 3. Later in prayer, I sit on an orange 80s padded vinyl rumpus room gold-legged cocktail stool, straddling a box of unsold copies of Thinking and Singing, Poetry and the Practice of Philosophy, hay-hooked from drifts of loose basement matter, one of 5 boxes at the tail end of prayer, and look at the snow-streaked mountain which assists its rise to roost in me. How little I have in my head. The moss, oaks, rocks, wild plum groaning out of me. All I do is shuffle my feet. The mountain is dark, fire sent into fire. Its light is dark, beaming ray of its ceremonies. Two short ones, and then that's it for me. Snow Mountain. The mountain in the robe of its first skin, its practiced, early skin, walking forward skin, enucleated quiet, current of Sabbath circling it, which is a look, lash shaded, coming before rock. The mountain purges itself of teleological will while it builds your eye. Breath of the blackest bassoon, its hearing creates an underworld. The mountain in the mystagogic robes of standing still. Getting to Snow Mountain. One route to Snow Mountain, the one that opens both its eyes, is up terraces behind the balanced on a rock house, along canals old Mr. Hunt put in the 60s to bend iron, water load shed each winter by the western face. From there, it's up the Canadian chimney. Then you trail south along the cliff base until you find an oak whose trunk has diverged into 5 heavy branches, one snapped by a storm 10 winters ago. Climb the southernmost branch, touching the rock wall with hands and feet as needed, and you are carried to the plateau topping the cliff. The mountain from there is basaltic verticals, bucks in rut in the moss. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, Tim, that was wondrous. I'm glad we got to see you in both your modalities, the oral essay and the poem as well. I think we have a fuller meeting with you because of that. So thank you, Tim. There's so many pre-prepared questions I had, but I feel like what you've said is so rich and fecund that I really want to attend to what you said before we open it up to questions from the gathered. I want you to say a bit more about the arresting image of laying the contemplative tradition sideways. Why sideways? I have an intuition as to why you might be saying that, and my intuition is that you're pointing to the ways in which the contemplative tradition, at least the folks that you mentioned and most routinely referred to, are all climbing Mount Sinai, in the sense that there's a kind of verticality of ascent into intimacy with the divine, but that the trouble with that verticality is that there might be a kind of leave taking from where we are. So I suspect this laying on the side is a way of trying to correct a kind of metaphorical deficiency in the imagery of ascent.
Yeah.
Do I have that right? And
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, you can see a kind of counter push coming from theologians like Evagrius, who says the kingdom of heaven is apatheia and attention to physical things, theoria physike. And the same conviction in Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite that divinity is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. But yes. Traditionally, the religious imagination and contemplation is absolutely vertical, but and therefore unusable here, really, and possibly part of the problem, frankly, to speak boldly. But I wanted, before I had encountered Pseudo-Dionysius and Evagrius, I had wanted to see if this might be possible, that a mystical theology could be laid on its side, could assume the supine position, and carry this person kind of raised in this Cartesian cultural context over into that other place, like the other than human, the critters, the birds, the moss, yeah. So it was for me, it seemed like a big gamble. And also it felt like this is heterodox.
Mm.
Like and in a sense, I was leaving the community. We're not just talking about leaving the Jesuits, but the kind of community, the regular religious community with these preoccupations. And still to a fair degree, I do feel like a kind of a marginal outcast figure. But I'm okay with that, because I think this is exactly what Maximus and Erugena and the others had in mind, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a question about Fusike. One of the intentions of this lecture series and of the Insight Project is in some way to cultivate um, in theology students and theologians more broadly an attention to the sciences. Um, and it's interesting that, of course, you use this word "fusika," which is very much a part of the ancient tradition's conception of physics, right? And that conception of physics in antiquity was understood to be part of the spiritual life. It was not.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely. And even as late as Kepler. I mean, Kepler saw science as a kind of superb way of engaging religiously with the world. Uh,
so so
yeah,
what do you think about that? I mean, there is an ambivalence, and I think rightly so, in your writing about the utter insufficiency and inadequacy of certain modes of scientific inquiry when a certain kind of reductive scientism kicks in, and we try to bring what we've learned through that kind of inquiry into other dimensions of our lives. But you're opening up another possibility here in these remarks and in various of your books, that there might be another posture to derive from the sciences that might actually be compatible with this coming into where we are. Do you want to say a bit about that?
yeah. I mean, I think I have no expertise in science, really. I'm just a an occasional reader. Um, I think I think system uh, as a form of worship, cosmology as a form of worship, and as a meutic tool, as it is, say, in the with the Timaeus, is extremely powerful, and there is no splitting apart of religion, contemplation, a scientific investigation of the natural world. Yeah, so I have a kind of nostalgia for that old way of thinking of science. Um, Sometimes when you read scraps, prose fragments from Albert Einstein, you have a sense that here was a religious mind pursuing its religion through scientific exploration. Um, it still is. I mean, absolutely astounding that there is coherence in being. I mean, this is probably the deepest religious insight. How did that happen?
Hmm.
You know, I mean, it is a source of astonishment. And you see that I see this astonishment wonderfully in Kepler. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to speak for with you for another 5 minutes, and then we'll have about 30 minutes for conversation with the general public. One of the things that I'm astonished by in your writing is the intimate presence of two words that we have learned to think of as opposites, ascesis, or the ascetical, and the erotic.
Mm-hmm.
For,
Yeah.
for you, these are not by any means opposites, but
No.
profoundly intimate to each other. Not just intimate to each other, they are actually aspects of each other. And I feel like one of the reasons why, even though there has, I think, been a return to attention to contemplation, there are people who are reading, Thomas Keating and practicing centering prayer. I think there is a sustained attention to Thomas Merton. Across the way, I see The Hidden Ground of Love sitting on my bookshelves. So there is a kind of cultural awakeness to the possibility of contemplation, but I think the contemplative is still haunted by a kind of misconstrual of its ascetic component as a kind of prudery, or a kind of refusal of the sexual and the embodied, and connected to that, the erotic more broadly. What aren't we getting that we've fallen into these bifurcations between the erotic and the ascetic? And how do you see them as sort of inseparably bound together, as perhaps even, two sides of the same coin even seems too distant? They're part of one complementary operation in how you seem to write about it. And I wish you could say a bit about that.
Well, I take my notion of eros from Plato, and for Plato, eros is this individuating propulsion that is in everyone, and you see throughout the dialogues Socrates trying to suss out what this propulsion might be for interlocutor A or interlocutor B, and then he nurses it and he shapes it, and he makes it really work. And I would say in that situation, his conversation is an ascesis. It is a shaping and a forming of this personal to you propulsive eros, this sort of craning into things. And it's, I mean, I think if you've ever worked with an acetylene torch, like you want to get the feather of the flame just precise, and you want to reduce the blue kind of aura around it. And so you get that by manipulating the gas. This is what ascesis is doing with eros. It is assisting eros, and it's making eros singular and sustaining. And I mean, you see in Diotima's second instruction to Socrates in the Symposium, where he moves from different erotic states, beginning with sexual eros to moral eros to intellectual eros to cosmological eros to divine eros, etc. So yeah, that's a long trek. That's a very long trek. So ascesis helps, and it brings up the intensity every day, and yeah, it just carries you along. Yeah. I don't see it as being antagonistic. I see it as being integral, eros.
The easy way of putting this, or and you tell me if this is too easy to the point of being facile, but it seems to me that it has to do with directionality.
Yeah,
That there is a kind of desire that the various traditions call craving, which is a kind of impulse towards, I think, mastery and possession, which is a kind of outward moving desire, but it's a consuming desire.
absolutely. And I would call that desire acedia. That's this freneticism. I mean, our culture is ascetic. We're just drowning in it. It's this anxious reaching and acquiring and throwing away and you know just the and the envy, acedia. Yeah,
Wow.
so you want to, I'm taking all this from Evagrius. I mean, so you want to push this out. This is not, this is, you know, and Evagrius has some, he has some excellent advice on how to do that. Like it's kind of counterintuitive. Why would you, I can't think of what he recommends for acedia, but he recommends for anger, for during anger, a singing of the Psalms. Yeah,
Presumably including the angry one. So acedia for listeners is sometimes personified as the noonday demon. It's
right.
sometimes associated with boredom or a kind of loss of appetite.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's actually manifests itself as disordered appetite.
Oh, absolutely. It, yeah, the noonday demon, like my acedia comes to me around, well, between noon and 5 o'clock. Like that's kind of the dangerous time for it. And it's an unraveling. It is a sense of I should be doing something else, you know. I'm not properly respected in this state. I should be elsewhere. Do you remember in Merton's journals from the late 50s where he has all these plans? He wants to set up a monastery in Colombia. He wants to go to Italy to be a hermit, etc. Ascetic.
Mhm.
And I mean this individuating eros is just splintered, really, and he just stews in it. He's it's a rash of acedia, and yeah.
So ascesis is the work of putting those energies into quiescence, so that our a more organic longing for where we are, for the world, for land, can emerge. And this has another direction. That is the things themselves sing out to us, and we then become capable of actually perceiving for the first time.
I think that Hecate is latent in the thing, but it's triggered by human attention,
Mm.
guard, and
Wow.
then it appears. Boom, there it is. So it's 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 a trait, individuating the thing, but it's triggered by something from outside, another.
Wonderful. Well, we could keep talking about this. I'm so deeply interested in how these Hecates might meet. You know, my own Hecate and the Hecate of the things before me, and whether both have to co-emerge. So there's much more we could talk about. But let's begin to deal with some of with their two questions, one personal and one more philosophical, and both are wonderful. Christian Tioso asks, any relationship to the English proto-revolutionary John Lilburn?
Absolutely. Like my ancestor, I'm a leveler as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this reminds me of what you say in your book, that all writing is in a certain sense autobiographical, but you don't mean the narrow personal self, but that the other revolutionary Lilburn might also be at work in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. The Michael Centauri asks a really fine question that I've wondered about as well. In our contemplative practice, how should we hold together the concept of hecaity or specificity with the fluidity and interdependence of nature? For example, how should we contemplate the shape of a particular mountain while knowing that even imperceptibly the wind, rain, and other geological processes are at that moment altering its form?
I don't think hecaity is a stable state. I think that the show goes on, and witnessing it, beholding it, becomes a kind of daily practice. It becomes a way of life. It becomes a delight. And I think this is where faith comes in. I mean, the last orthodoxy that the last orthodoxy before you're actually asked to leave the church, it is probably the orthodoxy of human exceptionalism. Nothing's like us. We are res cogitans, and everything else is res extensa, and like just it's what did Heidegger call it? Standing reserve. So it's, you know, do with it as you will. To step away from that and say everything is conscious, everything. There is a sentience or conatus in everything. Spinoza. Yeah, this is the kind of unforgivable heterodoxy. But here's where faith comes in. You think, I think this is possibly true. I think I can, there are responses to me, and obviously I am responding to Katie's and other things, Quachali, etc. No, I'm going to buy into that. I'm going to live in that world.
Beautiful, Tim. I wonder if there's another feature of this question that needs a bit more attention, namely that sometimes hecaity is put at the price of relationality, and we find ourselves engaging in a kind of zero-sum game with respect to attention. That if I'm attending to the singularity of this given before me, I lose attention to the way in which that particular is embedded in a larger matrix out of which it emerges. I attend to relationality more encompassingly, and then I lose track of the peculiar distinctiveness of the thing as it stands before me. Is this a real phenomenological pull or tension, or is there a way that you can have it both together?
I think it is important to take intention out of attention, so that it be less directed, less kind of will driven, choice driven, and that it become attention. This is a besottedness.
Mm.
That you are claimed, that you are that. I mean, the divine, the numinous light is everywhere, and it's everywhere beautiful. So I'm making a distinction here between discipline and intention, and I think that the discipline in theory of Fusike is to keep oneself permeable. I mean, as far as that is possible, reachable, available, and then it's like the thing plucks you, and it could be the whole of the art, it could be the whole of the mountain. I mean, now I get up really early. That's my practice, super crazy early. And I look up the mountain, and what I'm looking through is a plum tree in bloom.
Mm.
So I see this mammoth dark thing, but I'm seeing it through these brilliantly white, flowers. So yeah, just I think what I'm trying to say is it finds you, but your preparation is being available, permeable.
Fantastic. Um, I'm exercising great self-restraint because I wanted to ask a question about permeability. It's one of the central categories in your thought, but I'll hold. Kathleen Baker asks about agape and mentions, I have preached a sermon that takes Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's teaching on the levels of love and applied them to our relationship with the natural world. How would you talk about agape love in relationship to creation?
I may be misunderstanding the question, but I I I I have this practice, like this mountain behind where I'm sitting. It's in an urban area, so lots of people come to it. So I go up the mountain a couple times a week, sometimes every day, picking up trash. I also belong to a group that is pulling invasives on the mountain and um, grooming it, taking note of it. And I have no difficulty doing this because the mountain has been good to me. So but see, I may be, is this agape? Serving the mountain, caring for the mountain, looking.
This question might also be a way of alluding to the famed, and I think malicious opposition between eros and agape as two different
Right. I'm familiar with.
inimical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Anders Nygren's tome, which put these into zero-sum opposition. I suspect you don't actually draw that sharp cut at all. So for you, much of everything you say about eros applies also to agape, I guess.
Yeah.
So Wilson Dickinson has a question that is close to my heart and close to your book. In fact, this is a version of one of my questions that I had written up. He asked, I would be interested in hearing more about the politics of entangling contemplation and land, or perhaps how that plays out into politics. I think he's asking. I wonder if placing mystical theology on its side moves to the land and the people of the land. Speaking of the levelers and diggers. This would expand the political import of these practices to environmental justice and farmers and labor movements, and perhaps is part of what was stirring in Merton as he and Ernesto Cardenal dreamed of the revolutionary community that would take shape in Solentiname.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you give yourself to the land, then you don't even have to think about it. You care for it. You try to defend it. Yeah. So all of a sudden you're into politics that is always within the relationship. Yeah. I also think that that kind of basis for activism, that the contemplative basis for activism gives activism like a longer life. Like I've seen so many people burn out, just get fried, and because it's their engagement is chiefly around efficiency and affecting change. And no, I think that a contemplative route for an activist life is Yeah, laying mystical theology on its side is absolutely a political act, and leads to, well, a life of a particular form of politics.
Wonderful. Um, Cornelia van Roost asks, as you are describing the relationship amongst esquisses and eros and Acadia, I'm wondering where the aesthetic fits into all of this. To me, aesthetics seems to enable the relationship among these states. And of course, this is a great question to put to a poet. So,
Well, aesthetics, yes, yes. Isn't it all about aesthetics? I mean, isn't it all about the apperception of beauty, the celebration of beauty, the welcoming of beauty? Yeah.
I wonder if Cornelia is also asking, and this is a tricky one to articulate well. I mean, not just I want to ask, building on Cornelia, but I think this might be in Cornelia's question too. It's not just the reception moment of the aesthetic, right? The capacity to recognize and register the astonishing achaity and beauty of things, but also whether the only proper way to meet that is in some way in an aesthetic response. That is, I mean, not many of us will write poetry like you do, but something in the moment of recognition of the aesthetic, compelling loveliness of things needs to be responded to in a mode that is akin to what we perceive. And so we also ought, in some sense, I hate to use the word ought, that might not be the right word for this, respond generatively in an aesthetic key so that we produce things that are, even if they're academic essays, have a beauty about them. I wonder what you think about that.
I agree. I was also thinking that, and I think this should be said, that eros is this propulsive thing coming out of us, and as it comes out more and more, we see ourselves, but it's not generated by us. It is teleological. It's this besotted stumbling toward beauty, moral beauty, political beauty, intellectual beauty, physical beauty. And what comes out of that stumbling toward this beautiful thing that you have allowed to reach you, is a way of life. Yeah, and I'm sure it would produce moral beauty, and one would hope literary beauty or artistic beauty, but
Or
maybe not necessarily. Really, like you're just drawn to it. You see something that you see something that is better than anything you've seen before. Of course, you're going to walk toward it.
yeah, and respond in kind, in some kind.
Yeah.
This phrase, way of life, triggers, of course, a very profound resonance with core loves and passions in my current thought and writing, specifically being entranced by Hadot. And along with Hadot, the late Foucault's work in hermeneutics of the subject. I point out that in both of those authors, in these moments in their thought, there is this sense that that philosophy isn't, and therefore also theology, isn't this sort of second order working of conceptual categories, but intimacy to the reality we seek to know.
Yeah.
comes about through radical transformation.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Socrates says in the Republic that philosophy is turning the soul around. This is it, like shaping a life, providing a foundation or a model for a life.
could you say a little bit about how you do that as a teacher? I mean, our universities are not spaces for even dare I say seminaries are not by and large places where teachers are themselves taught to become
No,
people who know how to turn around souls. I wonder if you.
I agree with you completely. No, I mean this is risky talk in the academy, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think some teachers do that. I mean, I taught for years creative writing. And what I was always listening for was the emergent eros in the writer. And it would manifest itself often as either a perduring preoccupation, but just couldn't shake it. And they were maybe a little bit embarrassed about it. Why is this stuck to me? But anyway, it is. And a distinctive voice. And my job as an editor and as a teacher was to facilitate this, just to clear the debris away from this so that it can come forward, and come to complete fruition. So and then people, when they see that this is what's happened, they're happy. They like that, and I remember one student saying to me, I am so grateful that you brought me to this particular line. You know, like how you use a line in poetry is I think a large part of the musicality of poetry. Yeah. So, but no, I don't think I mean universities are interested often in teaching expertise and whatnot. I don't think I don't think universities are centers of that are centers of contemplative practice. I mean the one thing that happens in universities that is good is that a group of people come together and especially in writing programs, and they support one another, and they befriend one another for life. They marry one another, and so that's good. And that is, I would say, contemplative, but yeah.
Well, we're drawing to the close of our time, and I'll give the last word to Paul Bartlett, who makes an observation and then raises a question. The observation is this talk sounds very familiar to the overlaps of non-dogmatic Zen Buddhism and indigenous ways. That sounds like a lovely and generous observation. The question is, how would you attempt to understand the Native American understanding in their own languages of the Creator, which does not translate?
I think just through listening, uh, attentive listening. I think that the point of someone like me immersing themselves in a contemplative life in relation to the land is that I come to this place where I can listen. And so one of the things that's happening on Wasana territory is stories are being brought home, stories are being retrieved. There'll be a part of a story with one family, part with another. And so Kevin Paul is working with the various elders and bringing these stories together, and so that there is, like a kind of single version of this particular story. Yeah, so I just listened to him. I mean, I asked him what he's doing, and I'm gobsmacked by some of the things he tells me. A completely different view of the cosmos.
Any last thoughts you want to offer, particularly to a community, at least that centers around a seminary, particularly on Lenape lands?
I would say that a contemplative life can begin in a moment, like in a flash, and that could be the whole of it. I mean, you're going for a walk in a park, you see the bird or something, just the way light is falling. And that moment is the kingdom of heaven, and it is shaping in your mind. It exists in your subjectivity, and yeah, I mean, in some ways, this is a very hard and challenging walk, and reading and reading and reading. But in other ways, it's very simple, very, very, very simple. It's just like a moment, and you're there. So,
Well, that
and this is personal, it's religious, and it's political. Like it annuls this bifurcation, this chasm between res cogitans and res extensa. Annuls it. It's over. Stupid idea. Done.
yeah, a very, very huge, stupid idea that has pervaded our lives for
Yeah,
a few centuries.
exactly.
Well, Tim, I'm sure that I share with all who were present today a tremendous sense of gratitude and for stirring things in us to a kind of awakening and clarity of perception. You have a singular capacity to awaken things in us, and that might mean trouble